Welcome to HardScript.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. She texted me at 7:42 p.m. sharp. Working late at the office conference. Don't wait up tonight. That was her message, short, polished, professional. Like she'd written it while standing too close to someone else. My thumb hovered over the screen for a second, then I typed. Hope you and Jake from accounting enjoy the presentation. I hit send. No emojis, no punctuation beyond that period. Just clean, cold truth dressed as sarcasm. 20 minutes later, I heard her car in the driveway. The keys rattled in the lock, like her hands were shaking. She came in breathless, eyes darting between me and her phone, trying to build a story in her head before I could speak. But I didn't say a word. I just looked at her, calm, collected, and then looked away. That silence hit harder than any question. She asked why I'd sent that message. I didn't answer. She said she didn't know what I was talking about. I nodded once and went back to finishing my dinner. The way her voice cracked after that, it told me everything I needed to know. The thing is, I hadn't suspected her until that night. But guilt has its own gravity, and her reaction made the truth surface faster than any proof could. While she stormed off to the bedroom, I sat there quietly, sipping the last of my coffee from a chipped Starbucks mug, replaying every moment from the past few months. The late meetings. The sudden phone turns when I walked by. The new perfume she started wearing. Light, expensive, not something she'd ever bought at Target or Amazon. It all connected now. At 9:15, she came out, calmer but pale. She said she was sorry for snapping, that she'd been stressed. I told her not to worry about it, that I believed her. The lie came out smooth, easy. That's when she relaxed. And that's when I knew she really was lying. When she went to shower, I checked the trash. Found a receipt from Olive Garden. Dinner for two, one day earlier, timestamped for 7:38 p.m. The same time she told me she'd been at training. I took a picture of it, not to confront her, but to remember the moment everything changed. Because from that night on, she'd think I was still the same man, predictable, forgiving, blind. But she had no idea what silence looks like when it finally wakes up. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened. She made breakfast, smiled, even kissed my cheek before leaving for work. But her hands trembled slightly when she picked up her keys. Guilt always leaves fingerprints, not on objects, but in gestures. I sat at the kitchen table long after she left, just listening to the clock tick. I didn't feel anger anymore. What replaced it was sharper, colder clarity. I opened my laptop, logged into our shared phone account, and scrolled through her call logs. Jake's number appeared too often. Late nights, early mornings, 10-minute calls that ended right before she got home. I didn't call him. I didn't text her. I just noted the pattern, like someone quietly building a case no one would ever see. By lunchtime, I'd already memorized every timestamp. That evening, she texted that she'd be home late again. Another conference. I replied with one word. Okay. No sarcasm, no emotion. Just a mirror of her tone. I could almost feel the panic through the phone when she saw I wasn't reacting. Instead of staying home, I drove to the Olive Garden where that receipt came from. Same table near the window, 2 glasses of wine sitting untouched, a couple laughing a few seats away. The hostess recognized me when I asked about reservations under her name. Her hesitation told me enough. I thanked her and left. I stopped by Target afterward, bought a new phone. No shared plans, no sync data. Clean. Then I drove to the lake outside town, the same one where we used to watch sunsets years ago. I sat in my truck, watching the water reflect the fading light. It felt strange to realize how calm I was. No shouting, no revenge plans, just a quiet recalibration. When I got home, she was already there, pretending to be half asleep on the couch. Her hair was damp like she'd just showered somewhere else. She mumbled something about being tired. I nodded, said, "Get some rest," and walked past her. She didn't know that I'd stopped listening to words. I was studying behavior now. That night, while she slept, I saved every message, every photo, every trace. I wasn't building evidence to destroy her. I was creating distance, preparing to disappear without noise. Because sometimes, the quietest exits make the loudest echoes. By Thursday, I had already stopped waiting for her. No more checking the clock. No more glancing at my phone when she was late. I just went about my day as if she didn't exist. That shift alone started to break her rhythm. She noticed. Guilt makes people paranoid, especially when silence replaces confrontation. That evening, she came home earlier than usual. She walked into the kitchen, leaned against the counter, and asked why I hadn't called all day. I told her I'd been busy. Nothing more. That simple, detached tone seemed to throw her off. She laughed awkwardly and said, "You're acting weird." I smiled and said, "Maybe." Then I went back to cleaning up my plate, slow and calm. Later, I watched her from the living room. She sat on the couch, pretending to scroll through her iPhone, but every few minutes she glanced at me, waiting for a question that never came. The silence between us grew heavier, almost visible. She used to fill it with excuses and noise. Now it was swallowing her whole. That night, while she slept, I checked her cloud backup. Same password as always. I wasn't searching for revenge. I was looking for truth. And truth doesn't hide well. Photos from a hotel room. Messages from Jake. Can't stop thinking about tonight. The kind of words that once belonged to me. I closed the phone, sat there for a moment, and realized something strange. I didn't feel rage. I felt distance. Like watching a movie where I already knew the ending. That's when it hit me. She wasn't the same woman I fell in love with, and I wasn't the same man she thought she could fool. The next morning, I left before she woke up. I grabbed coffee from Starbucks, sat in the truck outside her office building, and watched her walk in. She looked restless, checking her reflection in every window. She was unraveling, piece by piece, and I didn't have to lift a finger. Around lunch, I sent her a text. "Hope your presentation with Jake goes well." No emoji, no punctuation. Just that. For the next hour, she didn't respond. But when I got home that night, her car was already there, parked crooked, headlights still on. She was pacing in the kitchen, trembling, trying to hide fear behind anger. That's when I realized something had flipped. She wasn't trying to deceive me anymore. She was trying to convince herself she hadn't lost control. When I walked into the house that night, she was standing by the counter, clutching her phone like a weapon she didn't know how to use. Her breathing was uneven, her eyes wide and unsure. She asked why I'd sent that message. Her voice was trembling, trying to sound angry but cracking halfway through. I didn't answer. I just took off my jacket, poured myself a glass of water, and sat down. The silence between each movement was louder than anything she could say. She started explaining herself, words spilling out fast, disjointed. She said there was no conference, that she'd been out with coworkers, that Jake wasn't even there. But I didn't ask her for an explanation. That's what broke her. She wasn't defending herself from my accusations. She was defending herself from my indifference. When she realized I wasn't going to argue, she slammed her phone on the counter and stormed into the bedroom. A few minutes later, I heard the muffled sound of her crying. Once, that sound would have shattered me. Now, it only confirmed how far gone we were. The next morning, she tried a different approach. She made breakfast, smiled, even touched my shoulder gently, as if testing the temperature of forgiveness. I thanked her for the food, sat down, and ate in silence. She kept trying to fill the space between us with small talk, news, work, meaningless things. But silence has gravity, and everything she said kept sinking into it. That weekend, I decided to vanish for a while. I told her I needed to help Mark with some renovation work out of town. It wasn't a lie, just not the full story. I needed distance. I needed to see who she'd be when I wasn't there to absorb her guilt. When I left, she followed me to the door, pretending to be casual. She asked when I'd be back. I said, "Not sure." That was it. No hug, no reassurance. I could see the panic flicker across her face for just a second before she forced a smile. On the drive out of town, I stopped at a Walmart for supplies, some clothes, a burner phone, a few essentials. As I checked out, I realized something simple but final. I wasn't running away from her. I was reclaiming the version of myself she'd buried under her lies. And when I turned off my phone that night, in a small motel room an hour away, I felt peace for the first time in months. She would call. She would text. She would panic. But for now, her silence would have to face itself without me. I didn't hear her voice for 3 days. Not directly, at least. Just a flood of missed calls, voicemails, and long texts that sounded like panic dressed as reason. The first ones were calm, asking if I was okay, pretending to worry. By day 2, they turned sharp, demanding. By day 3, they broke into fragments. "Please, just answer. I need to talk. I didn't respond. I stayed at that cheap motel off the interstate, where the hum of passing trucks replaced her voice. I ate breakfast at Waffle House every morning, sat by the window, and wrote down everything that had happened in the last 6 months. Every red flag, every subtle lie, every fake smile. Seeing it on paper made it real. It turned emotion into fact. By the 4th morning, something shifted. The panic in her messages turned into silence. And silence, for someone like her, is the loudest confession. She'd lost the audience she built her stories around. Without me reacting, she had no script. That afternoon, I turned my phone on for a single moment, just long enough to see one message from her that said, "I'm sorry. I can explain." That was all it took. Not the words themselves, but the timing. Because guilt always tries to rewrite the story when it realizes it's losing control. I didn't reply. I drove back into town instead, not to see her, but to observe. I parked near her office and waited. She left early, walking fast, her head down, eyes glued to her phone. A few minutes later, a man came out the side door, Jake. Same jacket I'd seen in her photos. He looked around nervously, scanning the lot, like someone aware that the walls were closing in. I didn't follow him. I didn't confront her. I just watched. Sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. It's clarity. That night, I returned to the motel, poured myself a cup of coffee, and stared out at the parking lot lights flickering across my windshield. My phone buzzed again, her name glowing in the dark. I let it ring until it stopped. Then I powered it off. Because I finally understood something she never would. Silence isn't absence. It's control. And for the first time, I had all of it. By the end of that week, something changed. The messages stopped coming. The calls went silent. And for a moment, I wondered if she'd finally given up, or if she'd just started hiding better. Either way, the quiet felt heavier than before. I didn't check her social media right away, but curiosity eventually won. When I opened her page, the first post hit like a soft punch. A photo of a sunset. The caption read, "Sometimes you only realize what matters after you destroy it." It wasn't an apology. It was a performance, one written for sympathy. The comments were full of the same predictable lines: "Stay strong. You deserve peace. He'll come around." None of them knew she was the reason I'd vanished. I closed the app and laughed quietly. It wasn't bitterness. It was the strange comfort of knowing that the truth was finally starting to haunt her. Because she wasn't losing me. She was losing the version of herself that existed through me. That night, I drove past our house for the first time in a week. The porch light was still on, but the curtains were drawn. Her car sat in the driveway, untouched. No movement, no sound. I could picture her inside, pacing, waiting for a message that wasn't coming. The next morning, I stopped by Starbucks on the way back to the motel. While waiting for my coffee, I saw her through the window, walking in, wearing the same gray hoodie she used to sleep in. She looked smaller, quieter. Her phone was in her hand, but she didn't look at it. Just ordered, sat down, and stared at nothing. For the first time, she looked real. Not composed, not performing, just empty. I didn't approach her. I just watched from a distance, long enough to see her take one slow breath, close her eyes, and wipe something off her face. Then I left. She'd made her choice long ago. Now she was living in its echo. Back at the motel, I poured another cup of coffee and opened my laptop. I started drafting an email, not to her, but to myself. A reminder. The subject line read, "Never forget the silence." Because I knew that one day, she'd try again. She'd find her words, her tears, her apologies. And when she did, I'd need to remember this feeling, this clean, calm distance. The kind that no lie could ever touch again. 2 weeks after I disappeared, I got a message from Mark. He said he'd seen her at the grocery store, pale, unfocused, standing in the middle of an aisle like she'd forgotten what she came for. "She looks lost, man," he said. I just told him, "She is." Because the truth was, she hadn't lost me. She'd lost the version of herself that used to feel safe around me. That evening, I drove back into town again, more out of curiosity than anything else. I parked near the old diner we used to visit after work, the one by the freeway. Through the window, I saw her sitting in a booth, alone, stirring a cup of coffee that had probably gone cold. The waitress tried to talk to her, but she just nodded absently. I didn't go in. Watching her like that said more than any confrontation could. When I got back to the motel, there was an envelope slipped under my door. No name, just her handwriting. Inside was a note. If you ever decide to talk, I'll be here. I know I broke something I can't fix, but I miss who we were before I ruined it. It wasn't dramatic. It was honest. That's what made it sting. I folded the note carefully and placed it on the nightstand. For a few seconds, I just stared at it. My first instinct was to ignore it completely. But silence, when used right, can also become a mirror. And I wanted her to see exactly what it felt like to face herself without my reaction softening the blow. So I didn't reply. Not that night. Not the next morning. I wanted her to live in that uncertainty, the same space she'd forced me into for months. 3 days later, I saw her again. By accident, at a Home Depot parking lot. She was getting into her car, and when she saw me, she froze. No tears, no words. Just that quiet look of recognition. The kind that happens when two people realize the damage is permanent, even if the love once wasn't. She managed to say, "You look different." I said, "I am." Then I got in my truck and left. That night, I finally understood what strength really meant. It wasn't revenge or pride. It was the ability to walk away while she was still standing there, realizing I'd already left long before I drove away. After that brief encounter at Home Depot, she vanished from my sight for almost a month. No calls, no messages, not even a trace on social media. For a while, I thought maybe she'd moved on. But the truth was quieter than that. She hadn't moved on. She'd shut down. I heard it from a mutual friend weeks later. She'd stopped going out, barely showed up to work, and when she did, she looked like someone running on fumes. One afternoon, I drove past our old house. The curtains were half closed, the front yard overgrown, the mailbox stuffed. I parked down the street for a while, just watching. I don't know what I expected, to see her cry, to see her move on, to see her pretending again. But the stillness was worse. It looked like a place abandoned from the inside. Later that night, I stopped by a Starbucks drive-thru. When I reached for my wallet, I noticed something odd. Her favorite playlist had started automatically through my Bluetooth. She must have still been connected somehow, through that old shared account. I almost turned it off. But instead, I let it play. Every song was a reminder of a version of us that no longer existed. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the dark highway ahead, wondering how two people who once shared everything could end up as ghosts in each other's lives. A week later, she texted again. The first time in 30 days. "Can we talk?" Just once. No games. I didn't respond right away. I thought about all the nights she'd left me wondering where she was, who she was with, and whether I even mattered anymore. I thought about the humiliation of pretending everything was fine while she crafted lies that sounded like truth. Then I remembered the silence that followed when I finally stopped chasing answers. That silence had healed me. So I replied the next day. Maybe, but not to fix things, just to finish them. She answered almost instantly. "Okay, tell me when." That night, I didn't sleep much. I kept thinking about what it would be like to see her again, not the woman I once loved, but the one who finally had to face herself. Because this time, the power wasn't in what I said. It was in everything I no longer needed to explain. We agreed to meet at a small diner just outside town, the same one where we used to grab breakfast on Sundays before everything fell apart. When I got there, she was already sitting in a corner booth, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee she wasn't drinking. For a moment, I just stood at the door, watching her. There was no anger left in her posture, no defense, just exhaustion. When I sat down, she looked up slowly. Her eyes were swollen, her voice barely steady when she said, "You look different." I told her, "So do you." That was it. No small talk, no fake smiles, just the truth hanging between us. She started talking first. She said she knew I didn't owe her anything, but she needed to say the words anyway. She said she'd ruined everything that ever mattered to her because she wanted to feel something new, and in chasing that, she ended up losing the only thing that was ever real. I didn't interrupt her. I just listened. Every sentence she spoke was a reflection of the silence she'd ignored for months, the quiet I'd lived in while she crafted lies. She said Jake was gone, that he'd blocked her, that his wife had found out. She said her friends had stopped calling, that even her family had distanced themselves after finding out what she'd done. When she finally ran out of words, she looked at me like she was waiting for a verdict. But I wasn't there to punish her. I'd already learned that revenge was just another form of attachment. What I wanted was peace. So I told her the truth, that I'd stopped hating her the day I disappeared. Because hate still meant she had power. I said I'd found something better than closure. I'd found clarity. She started crying then. Not loud, not dramatic. Just quiet tears, the kind that come from finally seeing yourself clearly. I wish I could undo it, she whispered. I told her, you can't, but you can learn from it. When we left the diner, she lingered by her car, waiting for me to say something more. I didn't. I just said, take care of yourself. She nodded, biting her lip like she wanted to ask if this was goodbye. It was, but not the kind she'd ever get to hear out loud. I thought that meeting at the diner would be the end of it. I thought she'd say her piece, and I'd leave her behind for good. But endings never happen all at once. They unravel slowly, in moments that don't look like closure until long after they've passed. A few days later, she showed up at my doorstep. No makeup, no pretense. Just standing there in the same hoodie I'd once seen her wearing on a lazy Sunday morning, back when things still felt simple. She didn't ask to come in right away. She just stood there, holding something in her hand. It was the receipt from Olive Garden, the one I'd found weeks before. She said she'd kept it because she couldn't stop thinking about how everything started that night. How one small lie had turned into an avalanche. How the man she cheated with didn't matter now, not even a little. I didn't lose you because you stopped loving me, she said. I lost you because I stopped respecting you. I didn't say anything. I let the words sit there between us like they belonged to both of us. She asked if I could ever forgive her, not to go back, but just so she could stop carrying it. I told her forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. It just means I'm not letting it own me anymore. She nodded, tears sliding down her face, silent but constant. You're different now, she whispered. I said, you had to break me to show me who I could be. She laughed through the tears, tired, almost relieved. She said she was leaving town for a while, maybe to stay with her sister, maybe just to start over. Then she looked at me one last time and said, thank you for not destroying me when you could have. When she walked away, I didn't call her back. I didn't watch her drive off. I just stood there, letting the quiet fill the space she used to occupy. Later that night, I sat on the porch with a coffee, the same Starbucks mug she'd once claimed as hers. The sky was still, the air clean. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of her choices pressing on me. That's when I realized the truth about silence. It isn't revenge. It's recovery. It's the space where pain burns out and self-respect takes its place. She had her lesson. I had my peace. And that was enough. What would you have done in my place? If the story hit you, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe. It only gets stronger from here.